Morning, everyone. We'll get started in about 30 seconds. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome this morning on a wintry, about 6 inches of snow outside my window morning. I think this is probably one of those few, well, maybe more than few mornings that we're happy we didn't have to commute too far to join this wonderful panel. Just a little background on what we're doing with these panels. We started these this year. They're a set of alumni career panels. It's a joint effort between the graduate school and career services. And it's aimed at helping graduate students who are thinking about careers outside of academe. And they may be aiming toward a specific area of work. In this case, it's kind of a bit of a catch-all in that we invited 4 esteemed alums who have sort of chosen their own path, have created their own businesses, and they really have great and diverse experiences as entrepreneurs. So what we're also trying to do, and I think we've very successfully achieved this morning, is bringing alums from many different disciplines who've gotten degrees in different areas and then went into this career trajectory, which was, of course, choosing their own direction and creating their own careers. So the way the format will work is we have Dr. Leslie Blood, who is the Director of Professional and Community Development here in the graduate school, and she's going to conduct an interview as well as doing a Q&A, which the graduate students, the audience, will be able to participate in through the chat. And I think Dr. Blood will explain how that's going to go and introduce our panelists. So without further ado, I turn it over to Leslie.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today, first of all. And I wanted to just share something kind of fun about this specific panel with you guys. We had some surveys go out for our grad students in areas where they felt like they needed a bunch more information and what we could do to maybe discuss like career trajectories that were outside academe. And I have to tell you, I was in the room with a bunch of arts and humanities students, and all they were talking about was entrepreneurship. You know, they had all these great ideas, but of course, you know, it was something that we didn't know much about. So this is really cool because it was specifically requested by the graduate students at CU Boulder. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you guys. And if you'll just give a little wave of your hand, and then we're going to drop right in with, you know, we're just going to get right down to it. So if you just want to introduce, tell us a little bit about your degree, where you are now, and what your company does. When I introduce you, that would be wonderful. Are we ready? Okay, let's begin. Gordon, I'm going to start off with you. So this is Gordon McCurry. He's the principal hydrologist at McCurry Hydrology. And you were formerly an instructor at CU.
That's correct. In fact, I still am a teacher part-time. I got my undergraduate and master's degrees in geology at other schools and my PhD here at CU in 2000, and that was in the geology department. And since about 2012, I've been teaching groundwater hydrology related classes there on the side in addition to my consulting practice.
Wonderful, thank you. And then I'd like to introduce Tamar McKee. She's the manager of Stephen H. Hart Research Center at History, Colorado.
Yeah, and I also am a co-founder and chief creative officer at Kala and Company. So I've been pivoting before it's a thing. I got a dual master's degree, one in anthropology and one in the museum and field studies program at CU Boulder, where back then, and this is in 2004, 2005, my focus was on curating the contemporary Tibetan art movement, both in exile and Chinese controlled Tibet. And then I went on to get my PhD from the University of British Columbia in anthropology with a focus on multi-species ethnography and human-animal relationships. And I was supposed to go back to Tibet for that research, but this was 2008 when things got really hard there. So I pivoted and went to my research was shifting to looking at human-animal relationships, like I said, and human-horse relationships. So I pivoted and went to another place in the world where horses are well known, which is Lexington, Kentucky. So I can talk a little bit more about what that looked like. But after that, I was a professor at Quest University, Canada, and then moved back to Boulder, wanting to be closer to family. And that's when my husband and I founded Kala. And then about 2 years ago, I got a position at History Colorado as well. So we can talk about all of that, but that's where I'm coming from. Thanks for the opportunity today.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to move on to Rachel Fleming, who is the senior UX researcher at Aetna CVS Health Company.
Hi, so I also come from a background in anthropology. I have a PhD from CU Boulder and did my research in India on gender and tech. Finished there in 2016 and since then have moved into the field of user experience research for tech companies. So I'm less an entrepreneur starting my own company and more an entrepreneur of my own career, I think. Had to kind of invent what this was and how to get the skills I needed. I've worked as a consultant for lots of startups. I'm a mentor for Techstars now and various other groups. And am very interested in kind of helping students pivot their skills into fields like this that are really needing social science and other grads.
Thank you for being here today, Rachel. Murad Kablan, you're up next, and you are the co-founder and CEO at Stateless.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Morat Kablan. So I did my PhD in computer science. I defended my thesis in 2017. And during my PhD, my co-founder and CTO now, he was my PhD advisor. He's still a professor at the computer science department. His name is Eric Keller. In 2015, both of us invented a new technology that helps transport data between clouds like the Amazons and Azure to the local on-prem kind of size of companies in a very fast and efficient way. So we filed a patent for it and we decided to commercialize it. So before I defend my thesis, we founded Stateless. And then we did Techstars Boulder in 2017. I defended right after that, and then we took off. We raised some capital, and now we have 40 people. Majority of them are based in Boulder, Colorado. We're very proud that we start hiring CU graduates and CU interns. So that's what we do.
Well, wonderful. Well, now we've introduced everybody, so let's get down to it. I have some questions for you guys today, and audience members, please feel free to chime in, ask what you need to do or what you need to. Use the chat function. I do want to keep this fairly conversational so that it's a little bit more entertaining for all of our audience members. So let's begin with you, Gordon. In a world where some successful startup founders have been celebrated for creating their ventures without education, what do you believe the value of your education has been?
I would have to disagree with that statement, at least based on my own experience. I think my education has been central, key, fundamental to my success. So I come from a science background, as I mentioned, hydrology, and in fact, groundwater hydrology, which is a more arcane aspect of hydrology. Most of us think of surface water in lakes and rivers as hydrology. There's also a large subsurface element. So I came from steeped very much in the sciences, and I couldn't be where I am without that knowledge. Pretty much everything I do is science-based, and I'm very much of a practical problem solver, but it's always based on first principles of physics and chemistry and math. So I simply couldn't be where I am without good, solid education.
Wonderful, thank you. Tamar, would you like to share a little bit about how your education has influenced your career, helped you get to where you are?
I'd be happy to. So I prepared most of my remarks to speak to my entrepreneurship side of the coin, which is Kala and Company. And so just real fast, Kala and Company is a light manufacturer of what we call zero waste provisions, products that replace single-use materials for food and drink storage and preparation, like reusable beeswax wraps, vegan wax wraps, cloth coffee filters, and more. Our mission is to provision people and communities with the resources and knowledge to eliminate plastic and food waste in order to honor the planet. So this is no small feat in these pandemic and then some time. So that's where I'll be coming from with my remarks, because I didn't get my degree in entrepreneurship or even business, though certainly running your own company gives you that life experience. So as I said, my background is in anthropology. And with that, I've been able to bring a savvy about cultural context and appropriateness that inflects across the spectrum of our business, from hiring and workplace social setting to how we source, design, and produce our materials, to how we message for marketing and publicity. So it was already in for Kala to care about representation and being a BIPOC ally way before 2020. Also, because Kala is such an environmentally driven company, my research focus on human-animal relationships has really situated us to not speak in sound bites and vapid cliches, but with real grounding in peer-reviewed literature and research findings. And so we've just taken it from the get-go to announce our kind of environmental intent and impact as a company. And I also just quickly wanted to say, with my background in museum studies, the interdisciplinary range from being able to navigate art and biology worlds and also methodologies has really come in handy too, because it's not just thinking about writing for a journal. With museum background, you really want to communicate things visually and for more of a general audience. So that's how that's come into play. I also want to quickly say that my business partner does not have as much education as me, but this brings in a reality check. So Kala is a dialectic of untethered from convention innovation and informed erudite practice and procedure. So we kind of have the best of both worlds there.
Thank you so much. Rachel, how about you? The role of your education when we look at where you are now?
Sure. So I think what I learned through the PhD process was how to be a good researcher and how to collect data from a lot of different places and often figure it out for myself, how to do that. And I think that there are a lot of people who have bachelor's degrees and master's degrees who have had great success in the user experience field. I don't think a PhD is a requirement by any means. But it does kind of help you be positioned for higher level jobs. After a couple of years of experience, people are interested in kind of what you bring to the table, and maybe will ask you to take on bigger questions in their companies. So it also has given me kind of exposure to field work and kind of what that can bring. I don't do a lot of field work now. I'm doing a lot of remote work. And so I'm working with people with many, many different backgrounds, but I do think education and especially experience in your own research project helps position you as a good researcher that you can translate to this field quite easily.
Thank you. And last but not least, Murad, the role of your education when it comes to where you are sitting today.
Yeah, so I mean, I will echo what everyone said. I will add that it helped me in two fronts. One is engagement with my team. You know, being an engineering focused company. So majority of our team members have like a heavily engineering background. When I have that similar background, it really makes it so much easier for me to communicate with them, underline kind of the challenges they're trying to overcome, brainstorm with them, which is a lot of them who came from other companies, even bigger companies, they said like that was like a big problem or issue for them. It's like the business leader, they don't understand kind of like they don't have like the same mindset, and they don't kind of relate, you know, what the engineers are going through, you know, if things doesn't work, why it doesn't work, and they don't have that level of understanding. It's also helped with the hiring, that I understand like, okay, is this person going to bring value or not, because I understand the background. So that was greatly helpful. The other thing is helping us from a customer perspective, because I was an engineer. What I didn't share earlier, that I worked before I did my PhD. So I was in the field. I saw the problem that our customers are facing. So I can relate with them. I can speak their language. You know, having that technical background, I can see myself compared to the other executive with a business leader who don't have any, you know, or very, very minimum. They cannot speak the language, you know. So that's where my education, I feel like it's really helped me.
Thank you. Gordon, we're going to come back on over to you. And I'm wondering if you have any advice you'd like to give to the students in the audience who are interested in entrepreneurship, and what would you ask them to consider?
Yes, that's a great question. I think the most important thing in reflecting on my entrepreneurship in my success have really been two things. And the first is the network that I have developed over the years. I worked for national and small consulting firms for about 2 decades before going off on my own. And since going off on my own about a decade ago, I've realized the other day that I've actually never marketed. I've never had to go out and sell my services. I get phone calls, and I get phone calls from people who I might have done a job with, you know, 25 years ago, who I barely remember them, but they remembered me. And so that networking is just so essential. And so for the grad students listening in, you know, your colleagues are going to go off, and some of them will go not into academia, but into industry. And even some of your friends from undergraduate days are also going to go into industry, and try to keep tabs with them. Because as each of you develop in your careers, you'll go to various higher and higher levels to finally be decision makers. And so that's really where, to me, entrepreneurship has paid off handsomely. So that would be the first big advice, is network, and keep those things alive. And then the second is be willing to do whatever it takes to get the work done. I think my biggest success has been that I have very rapid turnaround on what I can do, because I'm able to focus in on what my clients' needs are. And compared to when I worked at larger companies, any kind of company has a process and a certain amount of lag time, because you're interacting with other people. And so being a sole proprietor that I am, I'm a one-man shop, but that means I can get things turned around right away. And in my business, in the consulting world, generally I get contacted when people have a problem they need to be solved pretty quickly. So I can turn things around remarkably quickly compared to pretty much any other company. So it takes that commitment, whether it means working till midnight one night or working on the weekend. That's just part of what the rules are by this game to be successful.
Wow, well, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to Tamar. Do you have any advice for the students in this audience when it comes to entrepreneurship, and what should they consider?
Sure. So I have 6, but they're kind of bullet points, so I'll just go through them. First is, a great idea is nothing without working capital and a financial safety net. Bootstrapping can be agonizing. Protect yourself, trademark, copyright, share only to trusted souls. Be prepared to be imitated at best, outright stolen from at worst. Have a great accountant from the very beginning. Just having your ducks in a row can help on so many levels, networking and turnaround being some of them. Have an exit strategy full of nothing but personal brand and financial integrity. Yes, you want to go on and sell it for millions, but know your end game. marketing is worth the investment. Just make sure your conversion funnels are dialed before you invest heavily in that. So no use sending people to your website if you can't get people to convert. And then lastly, and this is a little off the cuff, so excuse me for a little bit of my personality coming up, but if you've got a nest egg or you've got some great investors and you are growing your business and you're on top, don't be a shark and go after businesses you perceive as potential competitors. I know that it seems like anti-capitalist or business not to do that, but it is kind of unethical and uncool, and it will catch up with you. You never know if the business that you are kneecapping comes from a historically underserved community and you're reinscribing cultural supremacist structures of power and disenfranchisement by being too kind of cutthroat competitive. So those are some of my little bits of advice.
Thank you. And I don't think that's too much personality at all. I think more of that would be great. So thank you so much for that advice. That's very helpful. Rachel, how about you? And I can repeat parts of the question, just what advice you have for the students that are interested in entrepreneurship and considerations.
Sure. Well, one piece of advice generally for students who want to go into any kind of field is to try to get some work experience while you're still a student. There are a lot of internships that are open to students and not open to people after they graduate. If you can't find a formal internship, it's a good idea to go ahead and you can chase one, you can create one, you can approach a company and say, hey, I'd really like to do some work for you. So nothing really compares to that real life experience and seeing experiencing the field that you're thinking about. Secondly, I think what Murad was saying about really understanding the problem that you're trying to solve from the inside is a wonderful thing when founding a company, to kind of be able to understand your customers, understand what they're going through, and if you have like some idea of what the problem might be, doing some research. I'm in user experience research, so get out there, figure out who the groups are you want to talk to, and try to understand what they're struggling with, and how you can solve that problem. Do some research on how it's already being solved. Maybe there's a perfectly good solution out there already, and people aren't really willing to pay for another one. So it's worth doing your research. And then once you're kind of into being an entrepreneur, there are all kinds of places that can kind of advise you, because you're not inventing the wheel here. People have gone through stages in companies. Programs like Techstars have kind of a structured approach to what companies need at certain stages. And there are also people who do some coaching for leaders, which can be absolutely invaluable for startup founders to learn how to become a better leader, and who to put on your team to help with certain things that you'll need. So go ahead and figure out what the resources are out there. There are a lot of good ones.
Thank you. Murad, would you like to share some thoughts on that as well, please?
Sorry, my kids were running around. They were getting loud here. Yeah, I have two things. One, I will piggyback on what Rachel said about resources in the university. I'll give some examples that really helped us. So we use NSF a lot, so as a PhD student or as a graduate student, we get a lot of funding from NSF, and they do have programs that help entrepreneurs. One was like the NSF I-Corps. That was really good. That kind of set the stage, set the foundation of from an idea to something you want to productize. What does the process do that, and how you message that, which is going back to affect my second point. But that was very helpful. You get some funding, you get some money. It helps you get out of the lab and talk with people and get the information to make sure that, okay, you're building something valuable. Once you do that, that also qualify you for bigger funds from NSF. For example, the SBIR, Small Business something, I forgot what it stands for. But that's the NSF I-Corps was like 50,000. The SBIR was 3 phases. The first one was like 250,000, and then that if you do that and you do a great job, and they're very flexible, like you don't have to like be very, very stressed about it. You qualify for 750,000, you know, and if you do a great job, you also be qualified for 500,000. We got all of that at Stateless, you know, and that was like really, really good, especially at the starting of the company, that when we have zero funding, we don't have any venture capital and it's a non-dilutional kind of capital. They don't take any shares, they don't take anything, you know, they have some restriction, like for example, the SBIR, they don't allow you to spend it on sales or marketing, just for the technical, the engineering. But that's what you need at the beginning as a startup anyway. You want to build a product. So that's a very valuable resource I think you get through the university. So don't miss that. I was surprised that a lot of people, they don't know about these opportunities, you know. Another opportunity also, this is more for Colorado, is the Aia Government Grant. We also got these, you know, we almost like we got 300,000 out of them. Again, it's there is no shares, they don't take anything from the company. It's almost like a free money. So why not? I think part of the problem, a lot of people, they don't apply, is because the application process is very intense, you know. But that's very good, because they ask you to build a business plan, to build a commercialization plan. You need these for your business anyway. So, you know, so why not do that and get the money, and now you have a business plan, you know, and they give you feedback if you don't get it. So that's a high recommendation. I was surprised that people don't know about, and I think maybe the university also can advertise more for these awards and these grants. I heard of them from other universities, unfortunately. I did not hear from them through CU. So that's how I was able to get them. The second thing, advice, is a lot of the entrepreneurs, when they start a company, they're very, very proud of their idea or their invention. That's also a problem, because nobody cares about your tech. People cares about what value brings to them. And that's a very shocking fact for a lot of people, even including for me. You know, I'll give you an example. If you ask me what is Stateless when we started the company, we're gonna say Stateless invented a technology that decouples state from network function, allows high performance processing to enable high scalability and resiliency. That literally, that was in my pitch deck. If you ask me today, we say Stateless is a software company that puts data in motion. We help customers accelerate data science. You know, so it's a totally different kind of game. But then when people ask me like, so how you do it? And we go like, well, we decouple state, and that's how the technology, everything. That's a very important thing, because unfortunately, I saw many entrepreneurs fail miserably in the beginning because they focus so much on the tech, positioning themselves on the tech, part of it because they are very proud of it, and they forget or dismiss the fact that nobody cares about your tech. They cares about what the value. Don't tell me what you do, tell me what you can do for me, you know, so.
Yeah, and on that note, I saw on your LinkedIn when like part of the description is to collect, process, and apply data without headaches, which I thought was like a really nice way to sum it up in one sentence.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, everyone. That's great advice. I'm going to sort of collapse now two of our questions, just because I do want to make sure we're leaving time at the end for people to ask you anything that they're wondering about. But I would really like to know something a little bit more personal, and that's about who supported you on your way to get to where you are today. And then also, maybe we could touch on how students can also build those types of supportive relationships, whether it's mentors, family, friends, however it happened, who was important on this journey with you. Gordon, do you want to start us off, please?
Sure. I think I've had two people that have been really important for me to succeed. One has been a family member, my wife. She's also one of my closest friends, and so I bounce ideas off of her. It's really nice to have that sounding board, just to get from an external perspective, but close enough to so she has a good idea of what I'm doing. Am I totally off base on something or not? And particularly in the beginning, when I went off on my own, having been a long time with other companies, it was scary. because there's a lot of risk of failure, financial risk. And so it was great to have her emotional support for that, kind of that launching off. Another person who's been very important for me is a colleague. Actually, I met him in grad school, and later on I ended up hiring him at a company I worked for. And then he left that company before I did, but we've stayed in touch. And he in turn has gone off and formed his own company. And we continually touch base and serve as sounding boards for each other. Occasionally we actually work together, but more often than not, we'll just pick up the phone and say, hey, here's something going on, and here's what I'm thinking about it. What do you think about it? And it's just so valuable to have that person with a similar life experience to be able to see if you're going down the wrong track or the right track.
Thank you. All right, let's continue to move on. Tamar, would you like to share about some of the influential people who helped you get to where you are today?
Sure. And as I mentioned, Kala and Company, it's my husband and I, so we're family run. So I'd say from the beginning, kind of to Gordon's point, you know, I've had my partner in life to really bounce ideas off and so forth, but that can get a little, you know, just kind of stuck in a feedback loop sometimes. So when we first started doing this, we started in Squamish, British Columbia, when our kids were being born, and we realized we were increasing our environmental footprint. So we were making these at home, but when friends would come over, you know, back in the day when friends could just pop by, they saw our zero waste provisions and they saw the value in it and they loved it. So we realized, hey, this isn't just something that is really helpful to us. And so we had that kind of internal validation at first, and then we took it to the Green America Festival in Portland, Oregon in December 2016, and we won the most exciting brand award. And that's when we were like, caught the bug, right? We're like, wow, people see this value beyond just what we and our friends find so interesting. And, you know, we moved back to Boulder. I'm from there originally, and we wanted to come back to, you know, my homeland in a way, because we knew there was so much here in terms of support for startups, both in the tech, but then also the natural foods industry, which is kind of two realms that Kala inhabits, but also surpasses. So we knew we were coming to a place where, you know, just entrepreneurship was in the water. But moreover, both my father and his mother, they're kind of old school Boulder. They've been around for school and everything. My dad was involved in the whole biotech boom. So through my grandmother, she said, and this is a story I've trotted out a few times, so forgive me if you've heard it before. She said, you need to get in with the Boulder Chamber of Commerce, and you need to meet Celestial Seasoning and all these people, because she knew them from kind of old school Boulder days. So her support of our company, giving us some of that advice, led us to the Boulder Chamber, who has been just such a great supporter. We won their Spree Venture Challenge in 2017. Also, my dad being so involved with biotech and venture capital and all of that, even though the scales and the business are different, he's been really invaluable as well. I also have to say we became members of 1% for the Planet, and also everyone here just, you know, really network, really work your connections. It's not just one thing to have the badge or the logo on your website, really make it contribute and work for you. So 1% for the Planet, particularly the local Front Range Steering Committee, have been really great supporters and mentors, especially when times get tough in these pandemic times.
Thank you, Tamar. And I just want to touch on something you mentioned earlier with the bees wrap. That has been life-changing for me. Like, I can't even tell you how much waste that reduces. So I'm obsessed. I love it. And I'd just love to pick your brain some more about all these things. So thank you for sharing all that. Rachel, how about you?
Well, my journey has been more kind of how to pivot from an assumed academic career into industry, and it is kind of a risky thing to do. The academic path is sort of well trod, and so I have to say there was about a year there that was fairly dicey when I jumped off the academic train and decided to learn these new skills. You know, took a contract position with an agency in Denver. That was really my first break. It took a while to get in, and financially that was difficult. We had babies and daycare, and you know, and so having a partner who was supportive financially and emotionally was important. At that time, I also have student loans that I'm now paying off. Now it looks worth it in the rear view, but at the time it was pretty scary. So I have to say my academic advisors were also quite supportive. They didn't really understand what I was doing, and they didn't have the resources to help point me in the right direction, but they were supportive. They were not kind of these academic advisors that will dismiss someone who's not going into academia. So that was really helpful to me at that time, because that can be really difficult to make that decision. There's also an organization that I have been part of for a long time, since I was in grad school, called EPIC, Ethnographic Praxis and Industry Conference. And it's social scientists and some designers as well, who have kind of that an academic background often and have gone into industry. And it's a large organization. They publish fantastic articles, and I reached out to a couple of people there and have a couple really wonderful mentors who've kind of, we had very early conversations to show that there was a path to go from having a PhD and thinking you're going to be an academic into working for a tech company and doing something totally different. So that was important for me to see that there are people being successful doing that, maybe, 10 years down the line. So those are my big ones.
Thank you, Rachel. And Murad, would you like to share yours as well, please?
So I assume the question is still about.
Oh, yes.
Okay, support. Yeah, I mean, I'm like Gordon. I mean, my wife was the best partner I can imagine. She was with me before I started my PhD. She always had this joke. She was like, I never thought marrying a student meaning marrying a poor person. And I was like, yep. She was working, she has a full-time job and everything. And I convinced her to move from one state to Colorado. I mean, she likes it now, but I truly, I could not do this without her help and support. She was with me from the first check we got all the way to where we are right now. And she was helping me emotionally, with any support, raising the kids. I have 3 kids, all born during, the startup journey. So kudos for her. The second person is my co-founder, who was my PhD advisor, Eric. So I was fortunate to be his first PhD student. We both started together at CU at the same time. And he was, I never saw him as just purely as a professor. I always saw him as a friend and a partner and mentor. He always like keeping me on check, making sure that we are saying the right things, we are saying the same things. I think we are very different in a very good way, that we balance each other, in the business, So these are the 2 main folks that I feel I could not start and scale the business without their help.
Thank you. So basically, it sounds like we need to marry someone who's awesome. Make sure we have good advisors and friends and partners. Anyway, thank you guys so much for that. I think I want to take a break from me asking you all these questions and see if the audience has anything. And if they don't, I definitely have a few more, but let's see what we've got from the audience right now. All right. We have, did any of the panelists take courses in business prior to beginning your careers in entrepreneurship? If so, did it compare to the knowledge gained from experience?
I could start with that one. That's a great question. From one of the big regrets I had in school is that there were lots of great courses in the sciences in my field of study, but none that I took in the business. So especially then when I went off, I worked for companies for a number of years, and I learned the business practices a little bit along the way as I grew into project management, because that's then when you start to deal with tracking budgets and schedules and things like that. But it wasn't really till I went off on my own as an entrepreneur that I had to learn the full brunt of those skills. And in retrospect, I thought, oh, how great would it have been even as an undergraduate or perhaps a grad level 1-credit course to have business survival 101 or something like that. So it was a steep learning curve at first, and pretty rocky at first to learn those skills. So that's a really great question.
Would any of our other panelists like to chime in?
Sure, I can say add to that. So yes, I had the similar experience with my undergrad. It was focused mainly on the engineering side, and I was like shocked when I started working. Even from an engineering technical perspective, you'd be like, okay, that's not what we thought. Things should be built and implemented in real world. Academia is almost like kind of provide like this perfect environment. You know, everything is in order. Like there's no dynamics, there's no variables there. So what I did, because I worked for almost like 4 years between my undergrad and my master's degree, so that helped me in the business, like being exposed. But I also started taking online courses. You know, not from the university. I was just focusing on like the business side. I knew that like I want to focus on that, so I was learning about sales. I was working about like business leadership, management. I did all of that, you know, so that was greatly helpful. I'm not a big fan of MBA such kind of structured programs. I feel like they're very broad, and sometimes it's kind of they follow the same mistake that I mentioned about the engineering. It's kind of almost like put the world in a perfect scenario, perfect lens. Oh, you just need to follow X, Y, and Z in business, and then your revenue start growing. You know, there's a lot of variables in real life that, you know, maybe specific courses, specific things. Like if you want to learn about finance or accounting, just take that. That's all what you need. You know, if you want to learn about sales pitch, how you position yourself to the customer, just take that. You know, and then the second thing I did during my startup or during when I was running my company is reading books. You know, you have to read. You have to always read. Like it's not a myth when they say like startup CEOs and co-founders read like a book a month. I got to that point. At the beginning, I thought like this too much and it's crazy, but there is a lot of ways to you can accomplish that. You know, so.
Thank you. That's really wonderful advice. And Jackson and Jacob, thank you for that question. I do have something here specifically for Tamar. This is from Julie. My husband and I are starting a business together, and I'm wondering what you suggest we put in our founders agreement, and how is the best way to divide the job description, both from the startup stage or later in a stabilized stage?
I think that, you know, you have those candid conversations. That's the thing about going into business with your spouse, essentially, is that you have to have an end game, like I said before. And so you have to have those really hard conversations about, you know, who's going to do what and what's going to happen in worst case scenario. And one of the, we've had it a little bit, but not in any sort of formal way. There's been, you know, recommendations that you get a business coach if you're in business with your spouse, so that you can have that crucial third party to really sort those things out. So I think that would be kind of the kernel of the advice that I would give is, you know, have those hard conversations. It so hinges on your personal relationship too. Like you're really kind of having all these overlaps. So I think with any, of course, business partnership, there's something that runs deep personality wise that you have to sort out and be honest and authentic with. But one way that you can get around that is, or handle that better, I should say, is by getting a business coach and kind of a third party to really objectify what you come to agreement with.
Right, thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience here, or are we just going to pick back up where we left off?
I had one. So there's this mention of books, and I basically was going to ask, like, so I'm guessing it's not just like go pick up your favorite like fiction novel. I'm assuming that's not what you meant. Do you have any advice about like what types of books, how to prioritize topics? I'm also guessing it's not like go pick up an ancient tome like from economics and like pile through that. I'm assuming there's a method, right? That's a little different from like a lit review that we do a lot in academia.
Actually, I would say no. It sometimes is good to read non-business books. You know, a lot of folks, they was thinking like, oh, I just need to I mean, yes, I gave some examples about business, leadership, finance. These are more like essential, but I also see a great value with science fiction, reading about history, reading about like leadership, you know. There is a book, I forgot his name, but it was about something like, if I remember the name, I'll shoot it an email, but about like the 900 myths and mistakes a human do through the history, you know. There is a lot of things that you need to be, entrepreneurs, like you have to be very, very open-minded. And again, going back to my point that the world we live in is very, very dynamic and variable. These non-business and financial books can help your brain, help you be out of the box thinker, you know, think about different things. For business perspective or entrepreneurship, it depends also what's your field. There is some books in my field that may not be relative, you know, to some other folks. Like, for example, if you're into computer science and IT, there is a book by Eric Ries. It's called the Startup Book. It's all about software engineering, how you're going to be very agile with customers. You know, there's other books about leadership. Like, for example, one of my favorite is Measure What Matters. I think that applied to any entrepreneur. And Negotiation Genius. That's also a very good book. Also, that help you prepare. How do you talk with investors? How do you talk with customers? How do you even negotiate with your employees? You know, to get like the best deal that makes them happy, and also you can afford as well. So hopefully these are some examples, and I'm happy to follow up with a specific list if you're interested.
No, thank you. That's helpful. Because like you said, there's all these articles and myths about like startup CEOs read 5 million books a day or whatever. Yeah, thank you.
I'd love to make a plug for interdisciplinarity. So in grad school, often you're very focused on certain courses. And I think for me, I make software now. And I've learned a lot of things on the job. But it would have been super helpful for me to have taken some courses in design, in product management, in agile software development, and in business to understand kind of like what is an earnings call? What does it mean when you say you have this, you know, when the business is doing this certain things? And so especially if you're thinking about going on to like a leadership position, management, courses in management can be helpful. And these are all things that I'm kind of learning on the job, and I've read a lot of things, and you know, you pick things up, but it would have been nice for me to have a little bit more of an orientation before going in.
All right, I know we have a question from Scott.
But before Scott asks his question, Leslie, I'd like to interject a book that I'd recommend along the lines of what Murad was talking about is one written by Yvon Chouinard, who's a famous mountaineer and founded Patagonia. And, you know, we all know Patagonia. And in 2005, he wrote a book called Let My People Go Surfing. And I just Googled it. You can get it on like for $8 on one of the sites I'm looking at right now. So it's really inexpensive, but it's essentially a story. Maybe this answers Gabriel's question. It's a story about how he went from being a rock climber / surfer dude and formed this company, which, you know, we all know, Patagonia, and just the trials and tribulations that he experienced. And really, as I recall it, the focus of how he wanted to get his employees really invested in the mission of what he believed in. So really great book, kind of a lighthearted reading, but he's got some really gripping thoughts in there that are just very inspirational. So I'd encourage all of you to pick it up and read it.
Thank you, Gordon. I appreciate that suggestion. Scott, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. And in some ways, it's a question for the panelists, but in other ways, it's also a question for the graduate students. And it's picking up on Rachel's point, and I think we've talked a little bit about it. It was an earlier question, which is that interdisciplinarity. For a lot of graduate students, they don't really get the opportunity to take many classes or get training outside of their own discipline, their own department. But it seems in a lot of ways that our entrepreneurs here took advantage, or at least wanted some additional training, or in fact, I would dare say needed it in order to take this different pathway, this pathway out of their own their own discipline or their own specialty in academia. And so I'm curious about the other panelists, their thoughts on, would they have liked to, or did they even take advantage of courses or training outside their own fields? And then perhaps to the students, how much interest is there, and what kinds of things would the graduate students, they can put it in the chat, or if they want to talk about it, I would love to hear from them too. Because that's something I've had as a priority, and it's something the university has as a priority, increasing that interdisciplinarity. And I'm curious about the audience for that, the constituency for that, and the advantages that it means for the careers of our graduates.
So if you don't mind, I'll add something here. I think that overall, most of the universities are doing a great job making these courses available. The challenge is not these available. The challenge is, especially for me, like after you graduate, you got hit with the reality, So I think part of it is like a lot of the students, they don't even know the value of these courses until they graduate. So I think maybe there is something, a prior step before that, maybe like a career path, discussion with the student, not in the last year or the year before, maybe early on. Like, what's your career path? One of the good schools, I think, like very well known with that, is MIT. They talk with the student the moment they started college, where you see yourself. And it's a little bit tricky because a lot of things change. If you ask me what I wanted to do in my freshman, I was totally different than what I want to do. But at least like get some option to the student. They know what's available for them, and then they kind of make a decision. I think that's the most important thing that I feel like it's missing, is not the classes. There's a lot of great classes if the students wants to take them, but the problem is we don't know what are the good classes, and we only know once we graduate and we're like, I wish I took some sales classes or management classes. That would be greatly helpful. And then we blame the school for not offering that to us,
Thank you. Those are great suggestions.
Could I also jump in there, actually?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so when I taught at Quest, so it's a block system school, and you end up getting a catch-all like master's arts and sciences degree. And you are advisor, you are fieldwork mentor, like you wear all these hats as faculty tutor there. And I remember so many times in my office hours, trying to convince students who said, I'm only going to be a physicist. Why do I have to take social sciences? Why do I have to take all these interdisciplinary classes? And, it's one thing for a well-meaning professor, passionate, on a one-to-one to explain the importance of it, but there has to be like a larger institutional intentionality and authenticity with showing, as we've talked about, how this plays out in the real world, why this is of benefit, that you can understand everything from art to sciences, just to, play upon the classic polarity there. So I think there's something to be said there that, we might want to require interdisciplinarity with students. We kind of don't really start realizing how valuable that is until like our real world experience can match that. So in lieu of that, perhaps being a little bit more, clear about how this can play out, not just for a career path, but just for you as a human being. When someone's just so mind in one direction, this is all I want to do, that creates a myopia and a lack of being able to handle it when you have those variables in business and in life that inevitably confront you. and you want to be able to balance that and handle that and not fall apart because you always thought your life was going to be one way in one career direction, and it doesn't happen that way. And I think 2020 really shows a global scale of how that happens. So before we get to something as earth-shattering as a pandemic, maybe we can take a couple steps back with institutional intentionality about why interdisciplinarity can be actually a really good and real thing.
Thank you, Tamar. That's really wonderful advice. We had one question from David that I think we've pretty much answered, but I'll just touch on it really quickly in case you guys have anything to add. Did you direct your education towards entrepreneurship? And if so, how?
I did not. I was typical engineering student.
Anybody else?
I didn't
I mean,
either.
I started talking to people at Epic while I was in grad school because I had an idea that this was like a possibility outside of becoming an academic. So I at least knew, but I didn't direct my education in that way, really.
Thanks, Rachel. Gordon, you have something?
Yeah, in grad school, both for my master's and my PhD, I was just honing my technical skills. So I was trying to be as sharp a knife blade as I could be.
Wonderful. Thank you. Tamar, did you have anything you wanted to add? No, you're all good.
So I will add something. Sorry, I just remember something. So I did not tailor my education. If you remember, I said like we designed the new technology when I was a PhD student and decided to commercialize it before I defend. What we did, and that's thankful to the NSF Corps, is they forced us to talk with the market, before I graduated. So I think that's a really good opportunity because students, we have a safety net. A lot of time we're very excited about an idea, but in real world is not practical. The market is not ready. There is a lot of challenges. Maybe there's bigger competitors, they're already doing it. So spending time out of the school, just talking with the people, talking with your potential customer, collect data. I think this is something you can do while you're a student, and if it doesn't work, then you can consider other career paths or another idea.
Thank you. Well, as you guys can see, we are about out of time, and I just want to say a huge thank you to Rachel for being here, to Gordon, to Tamar, and to Murad. We're very grateful for your time, and I know our students have been asking for this. So thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your experiences.
And thank you, Leslie, for hosting this today and guiding the questions. It was really great.
Well, all right then. Bye, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you
so
again.
Leslie and the team, if there's anything I can do, please feel free to share my email to students. I always welcome any questions, anything we can help.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll definitely do that. Yeah, this was really interesting. You guys are brave.
Yeah, worth it.